Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Law and Crime's live coverage of the United States versus Sean Combs. I'm Chris Stewart. It's great to be with you. We're on verdict watch once again. The jury returning to the courthouse as we speak, and they will begin their second day of deliberations. They deliberated for a little more than 5 hours on the first day. A very eventful first day of jury deliberations. Several questions coming in from the jury. We'll be going over all of that this morning. We have a great panel of experts joining us. Serena Townsend, a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, is here live, as well as Candace Kelly, a legal analyst who has been in the courtroom during this trial. And also you've seen her on Law and Crime during the trial. We'll be taking your questions as we always do, so drop them in the chat. We already have a couple ready to go. Let's begin by going live, though, as we've started our last few days following this trial here live on Law and Crime, by going to the courthouse in Lower Manhattan, where we find our Sierra Gillespie, the host of Law and Crime Scandal YouTube channel. Sierra, good to see you. Pretty busy day for the most part, considering it was deliberations. What do you make of some of the notes that we've heard from the jury thus far?
Yeah, Chris, good morning. We are about to start day 2 of jury deliberations. And to your point, it was a very eventful day yesterday, right? And there are a couple of different questions or notes that we can kind of parse through. But the one that really struck me most of all is the first question that we received, because we're about 2 hours into deliberations, and I feel like it is normal for jurors to have questions, right? I mean, it's not their job usually to go off and, be a juror. Some are deli clerks, some are architects, they all have their 9-to-5 jobs. They're not used to this. So to me, it makes sense that they got a question. However, the question was not one that I expected at all. It was that juror number 25 could not follow the judge's instructions, which, by the way, so important. That's how we started off Monday morning. Here's what everyone needs to follow in order to reach the verdict. Here's what we need to talk through during deliberations. And it sounded like juror number 25 couldn't necessarily follow the instructions. So right away, this is a stunning revelation, right? I mean, what are we going to make of it? And we could go multiple ways, right? I wasn't in the deliberation room, so I'm not entirely sure what happened. It could be that juror number 25 simply would not follow the instructions, not to sound too Dr. Seuss. Or it could be perhaps, and this is what I've seen in some reporting, is that potentially there was some sort of, I don't want to say language barrier, but maybe a simple misunderstanding. Because, I'm thinking about myself. I was recently just traveling to Montreal. My French is okay, but my vocab is strictly travel related. It's not, if I all of a sudden was on a jury in Montreal and I had to translate racketeering or RICO, I would be like, wait, hold on, what are we talking about? So I'm wondering if potentially maybe it was something like that. They were sent back to deliberate, and they continued on for a couple more hours after that. So I don't know, it could go either way, but I have huge questions about juror number 25, and then of course the question that ended yesterday.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you think of how long the testimony's gone, and then I just imagine you get to the deliberation room. It was at 1:27 in the afternoon that they received a note that juror 25 and the jury had said, we believe cannot follow your instructions. So it was a couple hours into this that they realized that they were having a bit of an issue. We didn't hear about that juror then when the second note came in, which we'll talk about with our panel in a bit, which came in at 4:49 p.m. If an individual asks for a controlled substance and the person hands it over, is it distribution? So that was the other kind of question that stood out to us that the jury had asked right before they went home for the day. Sierra, we do have our first question coming in from the chat. If you're watching us right now, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to drop in your questions. We'll read them live on the air. With Diddy's apology video, this is asked by Joanna M. With Diddy's apology video where he confesses himself to doing it, why are we taking so long for a guilty verdict?
Oh, this is such a great question. Thank you to all of our viewers who have been writing in. And this is something, this Diddy video that he posted to Instagram in May of 2024 following the release of that Intercontinental video. Of course, you guys know it now. Jurors have seen it. It was first leaked, quote unquote, to CNN. This is something that we talk about all the time on my channel, Scandal. So I just have to take a minute and remind you guys, If you like what you're seeing, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We talk all things at the moment P. Diddy, but beyond that, anything that's sort of celebrity crime or gossip or drama. Make sure to subscribe because there's a lot of things, and this falls right into it, okay? So we see this video, this intercontinental video, which is harrowing, by the way. And in opening statements, the defense, Tenny Garrigo, she simply said, yes, that was domestic violence. They straight say, hand up, yes, that was. And that was really the first time we heard from Diddy, his voice, his face amongst these many civil lawsuits where he says, I hurt that woman. Actually, we have the clip up, so if any of you guys haven't seen it, let's just play it right now before I answer the rest of the question.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life, but sometimes you got to do that. I was up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
And I just have to remind you guys the timeline in all of this, right? Okay, so Cassie files her lawsuit in November of 2023. It's settled within 24 hours. We do hear more from her, right? Actually, in this courthouse behind me eventually. Then we get a flurry of lawsuits. We're talking Lil Rod, the original Jane Doe, Liza Gardner. I mean, all of these are coming out. Then that video in May of 2024, and now we hear from Diddy for the first time, minus a statement posted to his Instagram in December of 2023. So we're hearing that. It's shocking. And then I'm starting to wonder, after the indictment, will P. Diddy take the stand, especially after he says, yes, I did that. He admitted to it. Well, we all know at this point, Diddy chose not to take the stand, which I'm sure, Chris, you can talk with Serena and Candace about that. It seems like, in my opinion, might have been the correct decision. But to the question that we had from our viewer, why is it taking so long in deliberation if we already have this video? To which I say, this was a domestic violence incident that he said that he's admitting to, and he's not charged with any sort of domestic violence. I mean, we're talking racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. And while DV and domestic violence doesn't look good and in fact is bad, I don't know if it necessarily proves all of those things. I mean, we heard from the government, we heard from the defense, we heard from both sides. And also, by the way, 5.5 hours of deliberation to me doesn't seem very long. I think it's good. I think it's a good sign showing that the jurors are doing their job and talking things out, Chris.
Yeah, and just a note on that apology video as well, he deleted it after it was posted, as if, as someone with millions of followers, that we in the media and everybody else wouldn't save the video or forget about it. I also remember 50 Cent, who's been pretty vocal during this trial and heading into the trial. I remember him commenting something along the lines of like, fire your PR person, after Diddy posted that apology video. Sierra Gillespie outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. We'll check in with you at the end of this hour. And I know you'll also be hosting our live stream coverage from 4 to 5. We're going to be live throughout the day here on Law and Crime. Jesse Weber will be coming up at noon as well, as we continue to follow these jury deliberations. And if there is a verdict, we'll also be firing up the live stream here and bring you analysis live. Sierra Gillespie, the host of Scandal on Law and Crime, thank you for taking the time to be with us. We'll talk to you shortly.
Thanks, Chris. Talk soon.
All right, let's bring in our panel of guests. We have Candace Kelly, a legal analyst and professor of media law at Rowan University, who has also been in the courtroom during this trial. So I'm excited to get your thoughts on this jury, what you were able to take away from this jury, and any details you can give. And also Serena Townsend, a criminal defense attorney and a former prosecutor. Serena, Rosa Hernandez says, I love Serena Townsend. So fan favorite, we'll start off with you right out of the gate. Question coming in from ZeroCool278. How come the jury selected the foreperson and not the judge in this case?
So that is standard practice. And it's very interesting because with the foreperson, we shouldn't get confused. The foreperson doesn't have any additional say or any more weight than any other juror. They're just like any other juror. All they really are is the person who signs the jury note. Sometimes they're the ones who actually write the jury note, but they don't have to be. And they're the person, of course, who announces the verdict. So, in a way, psychologically, they end up being like the leader of the pack, the leader of those deliberations. But in reality, they don't have any additional weight as any other juror. And it is standard practice for them to just figure it out themselves.
Update coming in from the courtroom. The judge has gone to the bench. I know yesterday he is on the bench right now. So I know yesterday he said that they weren't going to meet in the morning in the courthouse, that the jurors would be able to show up at 9 o'clock and just continue on with their deliberations. So we'll see if there's any updates that come in, especially related to some of the notes that we heard from the jury yesterday. Candace, you spent time during this trial in the courtroom. When you hear about this juror number 25, he's a male, he's a scientist, 51 years old, what do you make of that note coming back in the first couple hours of deliberations?
Well, from what we understand about this particular juror, he has an accent. And so the first time that I heard the note, I thought maybe there was a comprehension problem. And like Sierra just said, was it comprehension or was it something that he just didn't want to do when you get this note saying he's unable to really follow the law? So that was my first thought. The other thought was that he's not one of those jurors that, to me, that when I'm in the courtroom and I look at him and his actions, he's not someone who's as energetic and kind of puts something on their face where we can kind of try to read. He happens not to be one of those people. But it did get me to thinking that, wow, I think that was right before 2 hours that we got that note. There might be a few more problems, right? Unless this foreperson, as you said, who's the person who sits in a room and kind of galvanizes and makes sure that everybody is on track and make sure that this person speaks and this person speaks, unless they get that together, there is going to be a problem. It was interesting that he asked the judge to please speak to this juror. That is not a good sign. But the fact that we heard later notes that seemed to move on perhaps from that, that was a good feeling for me to say, okay, maybe they have moved on and it's not going to be as much of a problem as I thought initially.
Right. Yeah. And this foreperson that's been selected, I know Elizabeth Milner was talking about this yesterday with Jesse. He's an investment analyst, just 31 years old. Think of the responsibility now on his shoulders. He's a Connecticut Country Club member and plays sports, video games, and considers himself religious. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of the foreperson on this jury. Serena, we have another question coming in. Why wouldn't the judge sequester this jury? This is from MC. This case is so high profile and it feels like there's too much media frenzy around this.
Yeah, I mean, I think just over the course of time, we have discovered that sequestering a jury is just really bad for people. It's bad for jurors. They're away from their families. And I don't think that in a cost benefit analysis, we ended up getting any better verdicts or any more valid verdicts from sequestered jurors than non-sequestered jurors. I definitely understand the question. I agree. You would think like this is so high profile. We really want to make sure that they're not doing anything wrong. They're not going online. They're not talking to their family because it is a really, really hard job. The temptation is crazy for these jurors. They must want to do all of those things. And so, yeah, you would think that sequestering them would be a good idea. But overall, we as a society have just kind of moved away from sequestering juries unless it's really, 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 truly necessary. It's very difficult for the psyche of a person to be sequestered for such a long period of time away from their normal life.
And Candace, let's talk about the other note that was Candace, let's talk about the other note that was sent, a question that came in at 4:49. So this was right before they ended the day. If an individual asks for a controlled substance and the person hands it over, is it distribution? What part of the testimony that you heard in covering this trial do you think the jury is talking about when they're asking this question?
So we know, first of all, that they are in RICO. And if they're going through the way that the judge actually presented the jury instructions, he talked about a few things first in terms of aiding and abetting and things of that nature. But the first law that he really talked about was the RICO statute. So if they're going in order, they are in RICO and they're talking that predicate drug offense. So they want to know if Sean Combs gave someone a drug, but they asked, does that still count as distribution? So when we look at the testimony, we hear from many people, whether it's Jane, whether it's Cassie, who have said that, hey, Sean is the one who gave me these drugs. In fact, we heard Cassie's former roommate and former very good friend, who they met when they were 14 years old as models, say that Cassie was never on drugs at all, at all. So the fact that she is this drug addict is something that she knows Sean Combs led her to. So when we look at this whole idea of distribution, we're looking at whether or not Sean Combs is the one who gave Cassie the drugs, for example, or gave Mia the drugs, or gave Jane the drugs, or gave anybody the drugs. That's what we are talking about. The judge said, look, you have to go back to the jury instructions. I can't interpret that for you, but I think it would make sense that they might come to a yes on that. I can't imagine that you would have someone say, for example, maybe it's say I'm selling drugs to someone because they asked for it. That doesn't let me off the hook just because they asked for it. Again, I don't know the answer, but I could imagine how they could get to that particular answer that I just came to. You gave it to them, so therefore that's distribution, even if it's just one person.
Right. And the judge, again, on the bench right now, we're waiting for an update from the courtroom because at the end of yesterday, around 5 o'clock, when the jury said they were going to go home, the judge said that they would get an answer to that question from the jury. So we'll hear what they say when we're expecting it at any minute, really, at this point. Questions now coming in from about Christina Courtroom, Diddy's, his words, right-hand man. She was not called to testify in this trial, but she came up a lot. And you got to wonder if the jurors are talking about her already because she was such a prominent figure in the arguments that the prosecution made throughout the 7 weeks of testimony. I have a question coming in. Serena, I'll go to you. Jackie Reed asks, will we ever find out why KK was not called to testify?
Well, you'll find out if an indictment drops against her.
Yeah.
I do think at some point we may find out. We may not. Look, it could be that she was another cooperator and we just don't know about it. These kinds of deals that are made behind closed doors with prosecutors are sometimes we get to peek behind the curtain of those because it comes out during certain testimony or because, like we've been talking about, some of them actually testify against the big fish. She has been shrouded in secrecy. It's true. We don't know. Did she cooperate? Are they coming up with an indictment against her? Was she going to cooperate and then got cold feet? We don't really know, but there's certain things that we'll never find out. I do think we're going to find out a little bit about what she did, what her role was, and whether she herself is under investigation as going to be indicted for her role in this whole situation.
I also just want to know, where she is. Where has she been hiding out for the last couple of months? Candace, for you, another question, Christina Courtroom related. This is from Linda Mima. Will KK most likely have her own trial?
Possibly, if there is an indictment. We have to think of KK in this way, in my opinion. KK was available to both sides, right? So I'm sure that they both did their due diligence to say, could we use her? And we don't know if there was a deal that was made. As she just said, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But that being said, neither one of them thought strong enough, based upon their own, what was going on in their defense and prosecutorial worlds, to bring her there. The other thing is that during the summary witnesses, we saw dozens of pages of charts, of digital evidence, of emails, of texts that brought KK in. And so they kind of did put her at the scene in many situations without physically having to put her on the stand. Because once we put her on the stand, we don't know what she'll say for either side. And they definitely had to have thought about that, weighed that, and at the end decided against that. Could there be an indictment? Could there be a trial for KK? Absolutely.
Could you imagine what the days would have been for that witness testimony, though? I mean, think about just following the transcript, pins and needles. So that was taken from us. Obviously, perhaps a smart decision that she didn't go on the stand. Let's go to our first poll actually coming in. Which factor do you think influenced the jury the most? More than 1,000 of you voted. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Witness testimony, 54%, surveillance, 17%. Defense strategy was 15%, and then prosecution narrative 13%. When you see the witness testimony, Serena, at 54%, obviously these are our viewers voting on this, not a jury. If that's how the jury is seeing it, that the witness testimony is driving their decision of whether Sean Combs is guilty, is that good or bad for the prosecution?
First of all, I love this poll. I love this question because as a trial attorney myself, I always want to know what the people are thinking, what is affecting them, how they're thinking about different things and different pieces of evidence. And testimonial evidence, that is witness testimony, is clearly driving this whole deliberation. And, at least with the law and crime viewers, I actually think it favors the prosecution because there were no witness testimony for the defense. So I think if people are really hinging on what the witness testimony said, unless people are saying that they are thinking poorly about the witness testimony, that they felt that the witnesses did not testify well, and that the defense got a lot of good jabs against those witnesses on the stand, which is also possible. But I do think that your viewers are right, because that's the bulk of the evidence here is witness testimony. And they're also right because the surveillance video, as much as it kind of fills in some of the blanks and it colors some of that in for us, it shouldn't necessarily be the driving force, because as we've covered for this whole trial, that domestic violence situation against Cassie is not specifically charged in this case. It is used as context, but it's not necessarily a charge in the case. There's no assault specifically against Cassie to deliberate about. So I agree with the viewers. I think the testimony is super important here. And I also found it interesting that they're almost split down the middle between the defense and prosecutors, closing arguments or strategy. I think that's interesting. And I think that we're going to see that reflected in the jury deliberations too.
Yeah, always good to agree with our viewers as well. I know they like that. Old Hollywood Angels chiming in this morning. Good morning to you, because I know you've been with us each day as we've been live following this trial, Candace. How long is too long for a verdict to take place? Can this take as long as it needs? What's the time limit? And you think of the 4th of July coming up on Friday, so it's a short week.
Listen, that is a great question, especially with July 4th coming up. Here's the deal. They can deliberate for as long as they want. Do they want it to go for 2 months? No, they don't want it to go for 2 more days. We've got July 4th coming up. Last week, it was 104 degrees on one of these days. These people are coming to and from this particular courthouse, and it can be very, very straining on one. I think that when we look at something like Rico with R. Kelly's case, which I also covered, it took about 22 hours in one of his cases, 11 hours in another case. Kenneth Raniere, 4 hours. It really depends. It depends upon all the evidence. The fact that we are at 5.5 hours and we're still in RICO and we're still in those predicate crimes, which their last question was about, a predicate crime of drug distribution, they're not going to have a verdict today. There's no way. I would imagine that it's going to come before the 4th. I can imagine that tomorrow they might wrap up some of the details, all get confirmed by the end of a long day, right? Because they can also go beyond the courthouse closes. And then maybe come back the day after, regroup and say, are we still on the same page? So I would say totality, 2.5 days.
I think that's a great point, because the jury instructions themselves are 62 pages long. So you're going through that, trying to figure it out, make sure everybody understands it. Clearly there was the issue with juror number 25 yesterday, at least showing that there's a little bit of confusion about that. Then you get into the charges like the RICO charge, where you're figuring out those underlying crimes and piecing together everything you heard over the past 7 weeks. It's a lot to get through, and then finally getting to the point of making a decision. We do have a super chat question coming in from Kelly Bezick. We really appreciate that. Serena, I'll go to you with it. Consent can't be used as a legal defense against sex trafficking, but there are alternative strategies that seem identical. How is that true?
Well, you could use any legal strategy that you can in order to get out of a guilty verdict. Honestly, a defense is going to try its best to choose the strategy that's going to bolster their story most. Obviously, consent can be given